In this video, I'll be telling you everything about what I believe is the best deal when it comes to housing and mortgages in Denmark, and that is interest-only loans. I'll be telling you how these loans look like, what are the pros and cons, and I'll be running you through some of the numbers so you can see whether this is a good setup for you or not. What is an interest-only loan exactly? So for this, it makes sense to take a step back and look into how mortgages as a whole work. So when you take a mortgage, when you borrow money from a bank or a mortgage institution, what you need to know is that you need to pay back two things to the bank. First one is that you need to pay interest. So this is the normal fix for 1.5%, 2% per year, or sometimes you can have it variable as well, and that's a lower amount as well. But that's something that you pay each year to the bank based on how much you have loaned. So you'll pay, for example, if you borrow 3 million, you'll pay like 1.5% of that 3 million per year as interest to the bank. But on top of this interest, when you take a loan from a bank or when you take a mortgage, you need to repay the loan itself. So normally here in Denmark, the mortgages are for 30 years. And what this means in practice is that you will need to pay back 1/30 of the loan each year. So for example, if you borrow 3 million, you'll have to pay back 100,000 each year to the bank. In Denmark, you have a setup and a specific type of loan called this interest-free loan or after-free loan that allow you to skip the second thing, these installments or these repayments to the bank, this 100,000 we were just talking about, for the first 10 years. Meaning that for those first 10 years, for the first decade, the only thing you need to pay back to banks is interest. Why would you want an interest-only loan? So this for three main reasons. The first one is cash flow. So here in Denmark at the moment, interest rates are low, but property prices are high. What this means in practice is that you will not have to pay a lot in terms of interest each year, but yes, you will have to pay a lot in repayments because, again, 1/30 of a 4 million apartment, that's a decent amount of money. So specifically, what I believe is that if you need to pay out of your pocket, for example, if you buy a property or you have a loan between 3 to 4 million, you will have to pay around 10,000 krona per month back to the banks in terms of repayments for the loans and so on. And that's a lot of money. 10,000 krona is not something that you have like lying around, right? So in terms of cash flow, I'd rather have that money in my pocket and do whatever I want with that money instead of just having the obligation by contract to pay back to the banks each month. The second reason is asset allocation. And here, when you're making the repayments, it's not that you're throwing the money away. You're actually building equity in your house. You're raising the value of the stake you own in the house itself versus the bank, and that's good. But if you're already making a big down payment, so if you're already making 20% down payment, and on top of that, you're putting 100,000 each year, that can mean that most of your savings and much of your cash flow each year will go into just one asset. And one of the financial one of the financial best practices is that you shouldn't have all your eggs on one basket. So if you have most of your net worth, like 80-90% of your net worth in your house, and something happens to the house or the market crashes and so on, that means that your net worth might just really go down. And you don't want to do that. So in my opinion, it's better to have more diversification in your net worth, and instead of putting all this extra money into the house, for example, buy stocks or buy any type of asset that is not completely correlated with the housing. The third reason is optionality. And I am of the belief that the plan that gives you the most options is normally the best. And in this case, when you get these interest-only loans, when you get these loans so that you don't need to pay the repayments, you are not required by contract to pay the repayments. But if you want, you still can make the repayments. So you can call your bank and tell them, hey, I have 400,000 krona, I want to make a repayment on the loan, can I do that? And they will tell you, yes, you can, and this is the way you can do it. Yes, you may need to pay a fee here and there, but by and large you can. And it's just nice not to have the obligation to do and just have the option to do it. And in the meantime, if, for example, if you see that the stock market might do really well, as it has done, for example, in the last 2 years, you might say, okay, instead of making the repayments, I'm going to put the money in the stock market. And when you see that the winds might change for the stock market, you might sell those investments and then repay the loan. So it's up to you as well. Just having this optionality, yes, there is a price to it, and we're going to go into the price of that in a second, but by and large, it just gives you this opportunity. Just a disclaimer, these three reasons are based on a setup that we have at the moment here in Denmark where the interest rates are really low. We're talking about 1.5% per year for 6 years fixed, which is insanely low. If the interest rate would be 4% or 5% or 6% or even more, I mean, in Argentina we have double-digit interest rate for like forever, that makes not paying the loan incredibly expensive. But in the context that we have here in Denmark at the moment, with the loans being so cheap, I see no reason to worry about that at the moment. If those were the benefits and the pros on this, what are the cons on these interest-only loans? So there are two main ones. The first one is that you will still have to pay the repayments. It's just that you don't need to do it in the first 10 years, you'll have to do it all concentrated from year 11 to year 30, which in practice would mean that instead of having to pay 100,000 per year starting in year 1, you'll have to pay 150,000, following again the same example of 3 million, for the next 20 years starting from year 11. And that's a bigger cash flow hit, you could say, than if you just start in year 1. And For a lot of people, it might be that they would be a lot more tight than it would be if had they spread this loan over the 30-year period. There are two, let's say, opt-outs of this, two ways I would say this is not a really big deal. The first one is that a lot of people don't live in the same property for 10 years or more. So it means that if you live for 9 years or if you live there for 8 years or 7 years, you don't really have to worry about this. It's only more when you're really settled down, you have said, okay, no more kids and we have the family in place and want to stay here forever or whatever, then yes, you might need to worry about this, but otherwise you're fine. And even then, if you plan to stay in a place over 10 years, nothing stops you from renegotiating a loan after 10 years. Nobody knows how the world will look like in 10 years from now. Maybe the interest rates go through the roof. But at the end of the day, like if you want to avoid the repayments after 10 years, you can make a new loan and get away from that as well. The second con is that interest-only loans have slightly higher Bidragssats and they have a slightly worse kurs. Let me explain that what it means. So Bidragssats is this fee that you pay on top of the interest to mortgage institutions and to banks. It's a ripoff in all type of ways. I'm going to make a video explaining them soon. But what you need to know is that the Bidragssats fee, this one for the interest-only loans, all else equal will be 0.53% higher versus the other loan. And I mean, it's money. It's not that you just, and this is money that you're basically throwing to the garbage. It's these fees that you pay on the mortgage. So it's not nice to have to pay more of that. When it comes to kurs, so kurs is this setup that you have in the mortgages in Denmark that they're floating bonds instead of loaning money directly from a bank. I made a deep dive report explaining this in detail because it's very complicated. But what you need to know in practice is that when you get these interest-only loans, you have a slightly worse kurs. And what that means in practice is that you'll have a slightly higher loan. So your loan amount of the bank to you will be slightly higher, so meaning that you need to pay back more in the future than if you would get the other loan. It's not a big difference, but there is some. Let's not kid ourselves. All right, next, as many of you know, my viewers know, I love Excel, and what I'm going to show you now is the exact sheet I have used myself to consider whether interest only is a good deal for me or not. And I'll put you over here, and what you can see is you have the Bidragssats for repayments and Bidragssats for no repayments. As you can see, there's a, as I said before, 0.33% difference between both in both Nordea and Danske. I guess we have a similar setup in other banks as well. But yes, you have to pay slightly higher Bidragssats per year on top of that. What this amounts, for example, when I got my own loan, my loan was 3,600,000 or around that. What it means in practice is that pre-tax, I have to pay per year 11,700 more than I would have paid if I would have gotten the repayments loan. And because the Bidragssats is tax deductible, in practice means that I need to pay 7,722 more in Bidrag per year because I have this interest-only loan set up. Not bad if you ask me. So again, by and large, it's quite okay. But of course, this is not the end of the story, because when you're making the repayments on the loan itself, that means that you're also saving on the interest, because the less money you owe to the bank, the less interest you need to pay. So this is not a lot of money, as you can see, the first year. So the first year I would be saving, or it would cost me more because I didn't make a replacement of 1,380 pre-tax, assuming a 1.5% interest rate. And in practice, after tax, it would be 911. And this is not a lot of money, but of course, you will need to sum up this 911 each year. So after 2 years, it will be 1,800 something, then it adds up. But again, in the big scheme of things, as you can see, we're not talking about a lot of money. And if you tell me, Mario, you're not talking about a lot of money, and at the same time you have the optionality that we talked about, you have the cash flow that we talked about, you have the asset allocation, I think personally, and this is my opinion, this is worth the trade-off. So what's my final take here? So in my opinion, the benefits outweigh costs. For 8,000 krona a year to get all these benefits, in my opinion, it's just worth the deal. And if I would have to buy my place again, so I bought it in 2017, if I would have to buy it now in 2021, I would do the same. I would get an interest-only loan. Now, I might not recommend this to everyone, so my only opt-out that I would like to highlight here is that I'm the type of person who, this extra 10,000 krona that I saved each month, or that we saved as a family for each month, we invested it. So that money is growing in my Nordnet account, it's growing in my investments and so on. So it's not that I'm just spending it partying or traveling or whatever. If you're the type of person who struggles to save money and to keep money in your bank account or keep money in your pocket, maybe you're better off just having the obligation to make the repayments, because that will guarantee that one way or the other, you just make sure to put that savings into place. And for a lot of people, that's the reality. so just something to keep in mind as well. If you want to know how I invest my money exactly, so all these savings I do by having this no repayment setup, where do I put the money exactly, make sure to check this video over here where I go into detail on my investment strategy into stocks and cryptocurrency and all that type of stuff as well. With that, thank you for making it all the way to the end of the video. All the best and so long.